Hi, Matt. Can you hear me?
Hi, Neil. Yep. Let's see. So I believe you should have the ability to share your screen, Neil.
Okay, let me open up my PowerPoint. You got to have PowerPoint. Work
Got it.
on slideshow. You're bugging me.
So Matt, in our on the worksheet, you know, the on the Google Docs thing, we don't have anything from Kabir about the pool stuff, except what he might have sent us individually. Is that right?
Yeah, I just uploaded it probably within the last hour. So you should have access to it now.
How do I do that? How do I find that?
Let's see. I can
Oh, wait a second. I wonder if this is it. Wait, let me look. Yeah, I think it's preliminary estimates for pool-based non-tax revenue docs. That
exactly. Yep. But yes, that should be
okay, it's there. I'm sorry, I got it.
should be familiar to you in the sense that you got the email as well.
Yeah, I did. Okay.
Where are you finding what was uploaded? I'm not finding it on the town lists on the town site.
I think I shared with you the link. Maybe it got stuck in your spam folder, but
It might have.
let's
Upgraded our spam folder, and now about 100 emails a day go into junk.
gotcha.
Don't even check.
Here, I'll put it in the chat here.
I found it in the docs section. It's the fourth thing. It's next to the right after the food truck.
Folder shared with you.
Okay, everyone, I note that the time is 5:15. I'm going to call this work session to order and turn it over to our distinguished leader, President Steve Serco.
Oh, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
And remember
think-
to ask for the disclaimer.
Well, Matt, can you disclaimer?
Yeah, just quickly, a reminder to everybody who's here and who's listening or watching. This meeting is being recorded. So typically the council work sessions are limited to council discussion. But feel free to send me something in the chat if you if you have something that you wish for me to raise. If for some reason this meeting gets interrupted in a way that we can't continue on, I'll immediately end the meeting and send out a new link for people to rejoin. And otherwise, good to go. Take it away.
Is that me? Hello? Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, so you want me to start now?
Let's see. So I believe we had, yes, if that's right for you, Mr. Council President. I think the first agenda item we had was a presentation from the LIDC.
So yes, please, we're looking forward to it. Matt gave us a little bit of a preview, so it sounds pretty exciting.
Oh, great. Well, it's a really exciting project for us too. It puts together a lot of pieces, and it's the things we've been working on, and it's quite timely, especially with all the now that the focus, so much of the focus is on climate adaptation. So I've got about 15 slides. I'm going to be joined, I don't know where they're at right now, by Greg Canito, who's the co-founder of Rain Plan, and Jenny Janitz, who's the head planner, landscape architect for Rain Plan. Let me just check and see if they were trying to text me.
I'm here, Neil. I'm waiting. I think we're waiting for Greg.
Okay. Well, we can start, I think, and we'll just, we've got about 15 slides before we get down to Greg, and if that's okay.
Okay.
So this is kind of an interim report from the Grain Infrastructure Master Plan. And if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to go through the presentation, and then we can go back and ask questions. If that's okay with you, or would you prefer to just, I'll give you a little bit more context, and then we can go back and open the discussion. So the agenda that we have is some of the general plan objectives, some background, some data sources and base mapping, demonstration of the approach, and then integration with Rain Plan. So those are the 5 main activities that we have in the master plan. So I don't know how much anybody has gone back and looked at maps of Somerset historically, but interesting, at least to me it's interesting. Kind of a map nerd. USGS has all their historic maps that are geo-referenced, so we can look at how things have changed over time. So you can go back all the way to 1900, and every about 20 or 30 years you can see the difference in the community. And so I'd like to call your attention. You can see here with Somerset, and you can see Dorset Avenue. I'm just going to run my cursor there. So only about a third of in 1945, maybe 20% of the whole town was developed, and essentially everything to the south, there was no real development at the time. And then what we do is we take the historic streams from the USGS map and overlay them over the town. And that gives us an idea, because so many properties and so many parcels and tracts are graded out and disturbed land. It's hard to find natural land. You can see this green line that used to be in the middle here. Well, it's probably an old stream bed off of one of the old USGS maps. So that's a clue when you start doing some analysis that you want to look for things like that, because they get buried in the pipe. And usually you have a seep or a groundwater issue in those areas.
Hey, Neil, I'm sorry to interrupt. We're getting some background noise on your mic that's making it kind of muffled. So I don't know if there's anything that you might be able to adjust it or something.
Let me see if I put these headphones on. They're actually better now.
Can you speak again?
Is it better now?
Yes, I think that's better.
Okay, thanks. Got several sets of speakers and headphones, and depending on which application it is. And then if we're looking back at 1970, I think it's kind of interesting that that area around Dorset, which is up in here, is very wooded, mature woods. And then you can see all the new development, and you can see where the trees are just about leveled out in a lot of those areas.
Neil, could you go through the previous slide again? Because your voice was a little muffled. I'm very sorry.
All right. So this slide just shows what Somerset looked like about 1945, right before, you know, it really started to develop. You can see about 20% of the houses are built probably. And then the next slide over in the lower right, you can see where there's an old stream bed that kind of goes up to Essex. And that's a good clue because that usually tells us where groundwater is. And, you know, where we have seeps and high water table, you know, where streams have been piped or relocated. And then one of the neat things about your community is when we take the GIS from the county and overlay the tree canopy, almost the entire city, town has a tree canopy over it. So we have pretty mature woods, and I think that's a great thing to see. And looking back at the tree report that you provided us with, we can see there's a long history of maintaining the trees and figuring out ways to manage them. So there's also some best management practices or stormwater practices that are in Somerset. This is a map of the GIS, just showing locations of where Rainscapes projects are, or projects that were, you know, coordinated with the county through private homeowners. And you can see they're kind of sprinkled all over, and a lot of these just a symbol covers up, and it's 3 or 4 places. So one of the good things about the GIS, and this is important for us in looking at different drainage characteristics, is that we made a database from the GIS of every property located within Somerset. So if you type in an address, we can tell you how much lot area there is, how much roof area there is, how much tree canopy there is, and open space. So we can compare each lot and its contribution to stormwater runoff because of the amount of imperviousness. And when we look at the different types, we've started to do some analytics. So I thought this was interesting. When you look at the area in acres in Somerset, how much of it is building, almost 25 acres, and how much of it is roads, it's about 15 acres. And patios and pool patios, you know, very small amount. So we know kind of what the different uses are for each parcel and aggregate by the town. So we've started looking at the lots and how impervious they are, because impervious usually results in runoff characteristics. And we can see, if you look at this blue bar here, this histogram, you can see here, you know, between 30 and 35% of the lot is impervious for about 100 units, 100 lots. And then you go down to see things that are 15 to 20%, and it's a small percentage of that. If you look over to the left or here, and you can see that it's also another side of the coin. You have high imperviousness, up to 50%, with a small percentage of the lots. And then we go look at not only is the impervious, but also the different types of impervious. So different, you know, how many have non-roof imperviousness. So that tells us a little bit about some of the density that's been affecting the runoff and from the properties. So it's telling us that there's certain percentage are very dense, once you get over 35%, you get pretty much a lot of runoff from the property. So part of this was you all had some excellent data and that you've been keeping, and we took the maps that was done from the survey. We took all the little sticky note maps and put them together, and we looked at the flooding. And I'm sure has everyone seen this report so far? Or you're pretty familiar with it. So we mapped out the different areas where there were drainage complaints. Now, some of these flooding complaints, some obviously are high groundwater table and basement needs a sump pump. That's pretty much, if you're building a house in the DC area, you're going to have wet soils pretty much a lot of the year. And so the survey didn't really discern if it was a pump or we were looking for storm rainfall and runoff events. And you can see there's patterns of where the complaints are. You can see here and significant flooding. And these things tend to cluster. So when you take another look at it, we kind of did a micro scale analysis of the different drainage areas. And I believe we're up to about 30 areas that kind of have that characteristic where there's groups of flooding and the water goes from uphill to downhill. And so you can see here, this is one big kind of sloped area that goes down. And you can see here, there's 3 areas within each block. So we're really focused on what happens on the properties and not so much the street, because the street kind of acts as a conduit for the water in a like a stream. And water, what we want to do is look at the patterns of the water in relationship to the houses. And so what we did is we took those kind of waters to make those watershed maps. We took a high point and a low point, and you can see here the white is people that did not enter the survey, but you can see from the dark pink and the orange, which are significant areas of flooding, that this is a high point, and it kind of goes through the backs of these houses. And that's probably a good reason for, you can see the waters, these are on the downhill side. So they're getting the contribution of the water from the uphill side. And this water is going to flow through here and flow down in this area, and it ends up at a low point. And so that's causing what we've kind of deemed as, we have properties that generate stormwater, like this 4718, it's near a high point. So this imperviousness and the land cover contributes to runoff going down this hill and going through this property. And then we have receivers like 4719, which accept water from upstream. Last slide or two, we have what we've done is, this is very detailed, and we can't really do this for all 440 houses, but we wanted to show some examples of what some interventions would be that are feasible based on kind of the AI and based on the amount of imperviousness on lots, like what would be appropriate management practice to help reduce some of the overflow and some of the flooding. So our next step is, we're just about ready to conclude. We're actually going to probably finish up next week all our field evaluation, where we've looked at the kind of desktop evaluation and the mapping and verify it. And then verify our assessments, or what we can tell from the mapping and what we can tell from the analysis, statistical analysis about where there's potential for flooding. We need to meet with, I think, the town attorney and talk about potential code changes, which would be allowable based on the recommendations. So one thing may be limiting the amount of new impervious, or someone builds or extends a building or house, capturing some volume and making sure that that stays on site through either very slow detention or through disconnection of impervious area. And then the next step will be to do a final draft and complete the master plan. And then we move into the next step, which is integration with rain plan. And I'll turn that over to Jenny to go through that. She has a few slides, and then we can go back and review any of the slides or start a discussion. I just lost your sound.
Oh, Greg is here and Greg's actually going to kick it off and then
Okay.
I'll finish it up.
All right, so I'll stop share.
Jenny, can you share the slides?
Yes. Okay, 1 second. I thought we were going to keep with that one, but that's fine.
Or I can bring it back up again, and you can just tell me when to flip it.
Okay.
Okay, we'll do that.
Well, while they're bringing up the slides, thank you guys for the opportunity. Both myself, Greg Canuto, and Jenny Janis from Rain Plan. What we're going to give you guys is a quick overview. Is that integration with Rain Plan, and the original objective was, as you guys have commissioned this study and survey and analysis from Low Impact Development Group, Rain Plan was going to integrate on the back end to find ways using our program to make it more actionable, to make the data, make the information more consumable and actionable by your constituents and by your community. And so we're going to give a quick overview. Again, the objectives is to be able to provide information that is consumable from a property owner perspective of all knowledge levels, as well as, and bring greater awareness to the property owners in your community. And then also to incorporate functionality that empowers them to take action in their way, but also to understand how, as they're taking action, how that action helps if everybody or people start to take action in a sequence in those high and low points in those private drainage areas, micro drainage areas in between the public rights of way, and how altogether people doing more action to treat more water on their site, how more of an impact and more remediation can happen. But then also again, the Rain Plan is to integrate as a resource for the information that the Low Impact Development Group has collected, but also other resources that are available to the property owner that are made available through the federal government, the state government, and local government. So next slide, Neil. So Rain Plan is a technology, just a bigger picture. It's an online marketplace for stormwater incentives and financing. The big picture function of Rain Plan that we rolled out or are in rolling out is consolidating and creating a one-stop access to all the potential incentive programs that are out there in the country for private property owners. The idea was a stormwater incentive discovery construct. We've created a proprietary database that has aggregated all the different incentive programs that are made available by the federal government, nonprofits, state, local governments, and they're constantly changing. It's especially with funding initiatives at the federal government level that trickles down to the state and local nonprofits and municipalities. There's new programs that are being developed all the time, and there's changes to the existing programs. So what we do is we have a database that tracks and monitors and keeps up to date all the different programs and who they're applicable to, so that a property owner can put their address in and discover if there's any dollars or basically an incentive, whether it takes a monetary format or a permit format or some other type of benefit being provided to the property owner that they can take advantage for their property. So at the functionality level, integrating with the analysis, we are baking in the analysis that Neil and the Low Impact Development Group has done into the system specifically for Somerset. So Somerset community, the neighborhood of Somerset, will have the most robust information of any community online for their property owners. And then they'll be able to take that information and look at it in relation to if there's any funding and incentive programs that they, as a private property owner, can take advantage of themselves. So functionality, I'll just go through the quick list. initial generated analysis of their property with what available incentives matched with what available incentives and recommendations are out there for federal programs, Chesapeake Bay Watershed, Montgomery County, etc. Some of them are grants that are community grants that people can try to spearhead to bring into their community. Some of them are specific, like the Rainscapes program, that's just for their unique individual property. So a wide range of different types of incentive programs that are in that area. A neighborhood and property level analysis. This is unique to Somerset based on the data that Low Impact Development Group has done. Just like Neil was talking about, those clusters of, or those micro drainage of the internal private property blocks, basically your private property that doesn't have any type of public right of way or public treatment in between them, and how the water flows. This is going to give your property owners the understanding of the relation of the rain that's falling and where the rain's coming from around their property in relation to, around their property. But then Jenny's going to go through the tool that will also show them the relation of how much water is falling on their property, an estimate of how much is running off, and how much they could treat, how many gallons they could take out of the system and treat on their site with some of the technologies that are available, so that they don't run off into other properties. So how can property owners make an impact, not just to retaining water on their property, but also get a feel for how much water they could be taking away from going into other people's backyards or down those hills, adjacent to them. The third is we've developed a no interest, no hidden fees, buy now, pay later payment plans, basically a financing program that is interest-free and hidden fees. So if anybody wanted to take action on using one of like the Montgomery County Rainscapes program or one of these programs that require money out of the pocket from the private property owner, we've developed a program that allows for them to have an installment plan over time after the project's delivered, so that they don't have to worry about going out of pocket until the actual project is delivered and they know it's been done, and that they qualify for their incentives, so that they can limit the amount of pocket out of basically a funding solution that gives them greater surety of project delivery and allows them to focus on addressing the problem. Access to local contractors and competitive price proposals is a function that they can activate, they can choose to use. And then a individual property owner dashboard with the details about their property that they can use for resources related to ongoing warranty and maintenance. So if they have already invested in some stormwater, or if they have, or if they build new stormwater assets on their property, this dashboard will have resources for them to know how to maintain and manage and any warranty or maintenance best practices for them on their property. So again, the rain plan was intended to be a resource to your homeowners as you bring out about this information and make it known to them, for them to be able to understand it from their property owner context of how it impacts and benefits them, and what they can do to take action and how they can best manage and participate in this. Jenny has a background in landscape architecture and green infrastructure, and she's going to walk through the property level and the neighborhood analysis that we built into the system tools in the next couple of slides.
Sure.
Jenny.
Go ahead, Neil.
Neil, you're on mute.
It's okay. He's going to advance it one slide. So the way the rain plan platform works is we serve 4 types of participants and divide it up into 2 groups. So as you all are pretty aware, the municipal agencies have incentives available, and their goals are to meet water quality improvements and slow the flow of stormwater. And they've created a series of programs that provide value for the property owners, and to incentivize them to install these projects. Then our platform acts as a connection point and a nexus for helping those programs along, and for the further the adoption of these green technologies. So if we look at the property owner value, by using rain plan, you get more affordable urban greening technologies. There's financial resources available both through the incentive program and through the funding mechanisms Greg mentioned. And then, just reducing property damage for situations where we can help support people that are facing some serious drainage issues. The other thing that I think is worthwhile to note is that the platform assists with landscape professionals and builders, and helps with the connectivity there as well. And so by bringing shovel-ready projects to the marketplace, we can help homeowners initiate and install these projects more quickly, just to realize the value. Go ahead, Neil. So go the other way. There you go. So we're really excited about this project with Somerset because in a similar way to how we have two types of participant groups, our platform also works in two scales. And so, at the community level scale, we have on the left-hand side, you'll see a map of the drainage areas for Somerset. And within those drainage areas, you can see the stormwater arrows that are showing the flow of stormwater in those drainage areas. So by looking at the community scale, we can help determine where BMP technology should be installed, where there's you can realize the most impact, and the goal of these greening technologies is to see the value and the benefits at that community scale, because one person installing a rain garden might not make that much of a difference to the community, but if it's a collective effort, and that's why we're really excited about this master plan. If multiple people install these BMPs, then you can make an impact to the overall beautification, water quality, drainage issues for the community. So on the right-hand side, you see the individual property. And this is a tool that we've developed to both educate and help a property owner choose which BMP to select. So when they go through our platform and you find incentives that are available for rain gardens, green roofs, permeable pavers in your driveway, rain barrels, this interface shows you how much rainwater is falling on your property, how much can be retained by these best management practices, and then the difference of that is how much runs off and continues downstream. So Neil was talking about the concept of properties that are generators, receivers, and flow throughs. So the high points are where the stormwater is generating, and the low points are typically where the stormwater is ending up. So if along that path, these best management practices are implemented, you can slow the flow, infiltrate more, and help reduce some of the potential damage that happens downstream.
Jenny?
Yeah.
Real quickly, just to orient, there was a quick question about how residents will access Rain Plan. Rain Plan is once we finish this process, Rain Plan will be at myrainplan.com. And people will be able to just access to the myrainplan.com website and enter in their address. It'll ask them to confirm their address, and that's how they'll set up their property dashboard. They'll get a username and a login. And when the study's over on October 1st, they'll be able to access that and use it. Rain Plan is similar to like a Zillow, organized like a Zillow, where the property information is out there, but we've organized it so people can, and then property owners can take their properties and put specific information and have it under their own specific dashboard. But it's an online website that is accessible. Again, we've made it accessible. What we do is for anybody anywhere to be able to put their address in and find out what incentive programs are available. Specifically to Somerset, we've loaded in your guys' specific data that Lid has done so that your property owners can see it on their dashboard and have access to it. But it's made available through the web, just through general internet, and free for anyone to go in and see and discover their incentives.
And through this partnership with Lid Center, we're able to offer an implementation tool for your master plan. And so these maps are just showing some of the features of that implementation tool. And when you go through the website, you'll see that there is, like Greg said, a chance to choose the incentive program and to sign up. And then you'll be contacted to discuss more about your property. And then we go through the process of getting bids for the projects and helping the homeowner manage the installation process. So if you go to the last slide, Neil. So this is an example of one of our customers in the district who opted to change all of their impervious surfaces into a best management practice. They installed a green roof and permeable pavers. And so this is an example of, when you see this site and you think the first thing to think is like, oh, this is a property beautification effort. They're doing something really cool and unique. They're increasing their property values, but they're also at a bigger scale supporting the rest of their community by minimizing the amount of runoff that is flowing off of those impervious surfaces. So they've literally changed all of their hardscape and roof into something that functions to manage stormwater. And they used our service to do that.
Yeah, so this is DC has some pretty robust programs and pretty unique programs. The property owner here received $33,000 in rebates after the projects were completed from the government for the green roof and for the permeable pavers that they're installing. It treated 99.5%. The back patio is the only thing that's left concrete. 99.5%. There's a hill on the backside, and they had significant water, both from on their roof, on the back slope of the roof. It's a split level that goes down the back, and they had a lot of water going down the hills and going out the back, and their backyard was at a low point back there. If you can imagine, on the other side of that carport, the house is a split level, it goes downhill and down on the bottom. So they did this to help treat a lot of the water, protect their roof. They had damages with their roof because of the slopeness of the roof, but then also they treat a lot of the water around. And as Jenny said, treated just about, the entire hardscape of it is now captured, retained, and then slowly let out through the green roof or to the permeable pavers to permeate into the ground. But also the important aspect is they were able to source a significant amount, about 40% of the project costs were repaid, were given back to them as a rebate. They were able to put this into an affordable, no interest payment plan, and they were able to competitively source and select installers that they knew understood the program requirements to build the technologies in a way that met the municipal code and met the requirements to be a functioning technology. And that's the important thing that I think gets lost sometimes, is that with these green infrastructure, stormwater practices, they're somewhat simple, but they're, especially with the pavers, green roofs, some of the rain gardens, they have to be built functionally correct in order to maximize the amount of retention. A lot of times they're not built up to the standards, and if there's not the right soils conditions or there's not the right design due to the soil conditions, you can build it and it won't accomplish the intended objective because it won't function appropriately. So the program is intended to make sure you also get certified, qualified installers, and you meet the inspection code of the municipality without too much brain damage for your property owner.
Yeah. Oh, Neil, you're muted.
There we go. So one thing that I think is important, and this is very different from a traditional plan that would just lump the whole Somerset into one big watershed, is that, traditionally we've depended on the public sector for drainage and stormwater management. And what's happened, and I think talking to, Ellen was, Globitar was telling me, her situation is there's several houses and they're all draining across each other, and it becomes a stream when it really rains. So one of the things is, and the lawns are very wet, is if you did it by public sector, you'd have to go start a several year project where you know, made sure the drainage area was correct and that you had a drainage structure to build to, and that you could go and grade out the properties and have an easement. And it's a fairly complex and fairly really cost intensive way to look at resolving drainage issues. Where is this by using small scale and getting people to cooperate and realize that you're not only protecting your investment, but this individual action helps, you know, with the rest of the community by reducing water and flow through different areas. It's kind of a different approach, but it seems in Somerset that there's such an interest in doing things and, you know, rectifying some of these drainage issues on properties that, you know, it's a good approach, and it's going to be a successful approach we're looking at. So that's all we had for the presentation. I know we went over a lot of things, so please ask away.
Well, first off, I want this is Steve. I want to say thank you very much. Really fascinating look into the, I guess, geological history of Somerset, and like the tool that you're talking about to address for individual homeowners to address storm water issues. Do you have any insights on the American Rescue Plan and how we can tap those resources?
Yes. So if something has something to do with stormwater, and especially if there's any water quality element to it, we're working with a couple communities, and that's the way they've interpreted it. So you could do you know, there's a couple ways to do this. You could set it up so you could give grants, I believe. We have to check this, to individual property owners, or distribute that way. So it could, stormwater quality could be done. I think the window is a 4 year, 3.5, down to 3.5 years, I think now. But that's the way that I believe it's been interpreted. So
Okay, thank you very much, Neil. Does anybody else have any questions?
I had some questions if, go ahead, Robin.
Yeah, this is Robin Barr. You mentioned soil type in passing. We often hear descriptions of clay soil, and therefore dry wells are not compatible and rain gardens are not compatible, and so exceptions are therefore requested. What do you think of our soil? Is there a lot of clay in it?
Looking at your soils, they're all what's called a D soils, which is poorly drained. So even though they're poorly drained, I think a lot of your, not only clay, but I think if you should probably have some silts in there too, some kind of fine grain, is that it will drain, but it has some limitations to it. So you don't want to put too much water in a rain garden, in an individual rain garden, because it'll go through the media, and then it'll be like kind of in a sponge in a Tupperware. You know, it hits the clay area. But what we found out is that when you go out and do the field tests, you really have to do that. You know, there's a little device that you dig a hole and you pour water into it. It looks like a coffee can, and to really look at the infiltration rate. So someone has to really go out and do it physically. The soils maps, you know, when you read them, they're always conditionalized, meaning that, you know, if it's a high water table, it's poorly drained. You know, there could be urbanized, especially because it's urban soils here. A lot of things that may be mapped as kind of clays are really silts. So until you really go out and look at the property, that's just been my experience in doing this for a long period of time.
Thank you, Neil, Greg, and Jenny for making time and for your presentation. Very excited to see the study move forward. Neil, I had just a few process, some clarification questions, and then a question or two around rain plan.
Okay.
On the process front, just to clarify those steps you mentioned on the last slide, you're aiming to complete the study by the end of this month or the end of next month?
Probably gonna be next month. I got a call from Ellen. I guess they wanted us to present to the Stormwater Committee. That's I think next week, next Tuesday. I believe I have to look at my calendar again.
I think that sounds right. Yeah.
And get some input. I wanted to wait until we had this meeting to finish up the field work because make sure that we're all on the same page and you all are happy. So I'm starting to generate the reports now and the plan now and the recommendation. So we have to go out in the field, do some verification. We have in there to do outreach. So I think the meeting on the 28th will satisfy that, and then that'll help us to verify what, you know, we're not going into each property, but we can identify problem areas and come up with some solutions. So
Right.
I'm gonna say it's going to be in October, but we're pretty close.
Great. And then, you know, you showed us that map with sort of high point, low point.
Sure.
And then earlier you mentioned you have sort of lot area, roof area, tree canopy, open space.
Right.
I wanted to understand, like for something like this, we will have this data, but also overlaid with the imperviousness information that you have. So it would be both.
So we're going to generate a database. So when you look at like lot 4719, let's just say it's 4719 Dorset Avenue.
Yes.
So in this database, so it's over to, we'll just pick Drummond Avenue.
Okay.
Right. So when we start going over it's zip code, lot area, impervious area, acres, this is rounded down, so it's not going to show up. It's pretty small. Tree canopy, amount tree canopy, and this is generated from a GIS, roof area, remaining open space. So anyone can look at their property, or you can look at, you know, this is all public information, and just say, hey, how much impervious is my lot, you know, or, you know, so that's the way, or how much of the tree canopy is on my property.
So but for each lot, we'll be able to both assess the degree of imperviousness based on these data points.
Correct.
As well as the topographic aspects, the high point,
Yes.
low point. Okay.
Yeah, so
Okay.
that map, like I said, you can pick that, look up the address, and it'll give you the characteristics of that lot.
Great.
Very
Great.
simple.
And earlier when you said the sort of historic information that you had collected, the underground flows,
Yeah.
those are feed into the topographic understanding, or how do
Well, that's
they
just really giving
play?
us some history and looking at what used to be here. You know,
Got it.
whole farm, and then somebody came out there with a bulldozer and started building lots.
Got it. Then this data, just to be clear, we'll be able to access it through the rain plan dashboard. That's what that is what is being proposed here, correct? Is that the only way we'll be able to access it, or we'll have other avenues to access the data?
I will give you this data, it's yours.
Okay.
This is just simply the GIS generating spreadsheet.
Okay. And then on the rain plan side, what aspects of the services are free to residents, and what aspects the residents will be paying rain plan or someone via the platform?
So everything's free from discovery. It's your data. I mean, it's all public data. What we've done is you have more refined data because the low impact development group has done more detailed
Additional, yeah.
typically done, and that's been loaded and organized so the property owners have their kind of like baseball card of their kind of like a Zillow but from a stormwater perspective of that. So you're able to share that with them so they can have that information. The only thing that Rain Plan charges for is if a property owner moves forward with selecting an incentive and wants financing, there is not a finance charge, but there's a service fee for the bidding and the process, but it's as if they were just in the free marketplace to hire us as an agent to help them with scoping and bidding and financing or getting and putting it into a payment plan. We've been make sure everything else is, so putting in their address, discovering it, having their dashboard. There are no subscriptions, there are no fees. There isn't any conflict of like, putting out a solicitation to your community. All of that has been set up to be, so they can access their information. It's just better. It's just, the intent is to have it well organized so that they can take action if they wanted to on the publicly available information. They can take the information, they can go what we call off platform and just make phone calls and use that information to just manage their own projects and do that. The Rain Plan compensation aspect is if they decide to use us as a resource to on taking that action. But that data is there, the data is available, and they can, and also when they, to answer President Stevens, Council President Stevens' question, the funding, these acts are creating more funding sources that are trickling down from the federal government into these funding programs, and they're changing some of the funding programs because they're getting more dollars. So as these infrastructure programs get approved, you're going to see more incentive programs come about. You're going to see new ones come about, and the information will be constantly updated as new programs get announced or come about. Your community will get notified if they've set up an account that, hey, a new program was set up with this amount of money, et cetera, with these program requirements. So you also have the program requirements that your community members can download and, take action on as well. It's just all consolidated into one location for easier consumption.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, so I know you're asking them, because I think this came up last time, am I muted, about could it be used for our funding? And so, maybe a way to do this is doing some kind of a match for property owners that are interested in doing things on their property. Because when people have some skin in the game, they usually are a bit more motivated. And so that may be a way to look at, doing these things on private properties.
Great, thank you very much, Neil, and everyone on your team. Hearing no other questions, I think we'll move on in our agenda. So have a good evening.
Oh, all right, so we'll sign off. Thanks, and thanks for your time and your comments.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anytime to send something. So.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, that was very interesting. Okay, we have a packed agenda as always. So let's dig into it. The first item of old business or follow-up is draft food truck ordinance. I don't know if Debbie, Shannon, or Ron have something to add here.
So I prepared this ordinance based on the notes that were provided from the committee. Happy to go through it unless if someone else would rather speak first.
Or Debbie or Shannon, do either of you, I don't know, just have a summary or comments on it? Maybe not. Okay, if you could go ahead and read it, Ron.
Sure. Okay. So currently, as the mayor has reported at prior meetings, food trucks are not allowed in the town parks. And this ordinance would carve out an exception to allow food trucks in the town parks with a permit. And the ordinance would add a definition of food truck, basically a mobile vehicle that you can purchase food from. It would exclude, however, coffee, frozen dessert, or ice cream trucks. the committee recommendation was to not require a permit for an ice cream truck. And looking at some samples from other jurisdictions, I noted that coffee trucks and frozen dessert trucks are often exempted as well. So I put that in there for your consideration.
I have a quick question, Mr. Town Attorney. You said in the parks, but you mean in the town?
So currently, the town code only prohibits food trucks in the town parks. The town code provides that it's unlawful to sell, anything within the town parks. And that would include food.
Okay, but I thought that, for example, when there were food trucks on the street and at the elementary school, I thought you told us that that was also currently illegal under the code.
I don't remember that discussion, no.
Okay, well, I
might have forgotten it.
Well, I would suggest to the council that that needs to be regulated because we got complaints about that. We have gotten complaints in the past and concern that food trucks, such as the ones that are in Friendship Heights at lunchtime, might decide to come here. So I would suggest that the council consider how that might be handled in anticipation of a future problem. And also to say that there were complaints about the food truck at the elementary school.
So
I thought that we did not have jurisdiction over the elementary school.
No, we have jurisdiction over that. It's in the town.
Oh, okay.
And so the town can regulate the streets that the town maintains, town rights of way, town streets that are within the town borders. The town cannot regulate land use on parcels. For example, one of the committee recommendations was to prohibit food trucks being operated out of someone's driveway. That would be a land use restriction, and we'd have to look to the county for that type of rule. But we can regulate what vehicles use the streets and how they use the streets.
But wouldn't that in some way be considered a nuisance if somebody, isn't there another way to prevent someone from having a food truck or any other kind of commercial activity on their property? There's nothing in our code that prohibits that. And this wouldn't apply only to food trucks, but I mean, if somebody set up a pop-up store on their driveway, would that be legal?
No, well, it depends. But that would be a county land use issue.
So it's all
the county's not going to regulate a yard sale, a one-off, but if someone's operating a daily business, then they'd have to receive approval from the county. The county allows in the R60 zone certain no impact home-based businesses like a professional office that receives only a limited number of visitors a week.
Okay, so right now, for example, if someone set up a pop-up store on their driveway or even a food truck on their driveway, we would call the county enforcement people.
That's right.
So it is illegal under county law, not our law. So we don't even need to worry about that because it's illegal.
Yeah, I'd have to look at county law to give you a definitive answer. But again, I think, let's say someone's opening up a clothing store in their driveway and having 5 visitors, 5 customers a day, that would be a high impact. business
Okay,
and would be illegal.
Okay,
Yeah.
but because we regulate our streets, if somebody parked a food truck in front of their house in the Somerset Street, we
Mhm.
can regulate that, correct?
Correct, yes, yeah, and generally, commercial vehicles can't be parked or stopped. We do have a restriction under our traffic code, I believe. Let me look at that.
So I would hope that the council will address that in this ordinance because we, as I said, we want to anticipate the possibility that food trucks, let's say in the future in Friendship Heights, they get kicked out of that. They might try to relocate in Somerset and then encourage people to come here. See what I'm saying? There would be nothing to stop them unless we regulate it. It's just like we have to in the future address the possibility that people are going to start parking here all day to take the metro downtown, because that's happened in my mother's neighborhood, which is way farther away from the metro than we are.
Mhm.
So I'm just saying, I'm just asking the council to consider that when you're rewriting this law.
Right, so what are council member thoughts about sort of expanding the ordinance on food trucks to include the town streets?
Well, I just wanted to get clarification on the extract from 195.4 that Ron put in there on through trucks and commercial vehicles. I thought that might cover it, but I don't know. Where it says no through truck basically or commercial vehicle shall traverse any street within the town, with the exception of those now listed in 149.5. That's basically the meaning of that ordinance as I read it. And those listed in 149.5 do need a permit. Ron, is that your reading of that clause or not?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, that was the reference I was looking for. Yeah, right now we only prohibit through commercial vehicles. In other words, a truck that's driving through the town, but not necessarily stopping and operating within the town. So this edit to 195.4 would also prohibit the operation in the street.
Does this also pertain to other people that have businesses and park trucks on the street and up and down the block?
Well, this provision would only apply to food trucks in operation on the street.
Right, but is there such an ordinance that says you can't have a business with trucks going up and down your block? If you're running a business out of your house?
Well, so no. The code, the town code currently provides that through trucks, basically through trucks and through commercial trucks can't use the town streets as shortcuts.
Gotcha.
Hey, this is another issue. I'm not sure that is related to this specific code amendment, but just for the council to be aware, there have been complaints in the past of residents parking commercial vehicles with writing on it in the public space. And I know that I remember one time years ago, someone said that they asked me, they were thinking of buying a property here, and they called to ask me whether they would be able to park their truck. It was like a plumbing company or something. Would they be able to park it on the Somerset Street, overnight or whatever? And I can't remember what the answer was, but I just wanted to let you all know that that's been raised before. And there are many communities, I think, municipalities where they ban those kind of vehicles in their within their jurisdiction.
I think it might be time for us to take a look on a separate issue, take a look at these things. Cars that come here to park during the day and walk to the metro. It happens every day. It happens weekly in front of my house for sure. I take pictures of the cars. I sometimes ask people not to do it, when I catch them. But there are work trucks up and down my block. Someone's having a business in their house. It's time for us to take a look at the larger picture, of this.
Yes, and I threw that out to everyone during the orientations as something to be looked at the future.
So we have a lot on the agenda. I think we need to move on. I guess my two takeaways here are there seems to be consensus or general interest in expanding the proposed legislation on food trucks to include controls of food trucks on our streets in addition to in our areas. And we also want to take a broader look, perhaps at next month's work session, start an ongoing discussion, because there are a number of issues here that the mayor and Debbie have touched upon. Does that sound good?
Yes.
Okay.
So is this going to be ready to put on the agenda for introduction? Isn't that the question?
I think we can put it on, I think we can introduce it and then amend it if prior to approving it. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Or do we have, yeah, okay. So I guess my hope is that our feedback is understandable or focused enough that Ron can work with it and recommend a few edits in this draft, and then we can introduce it in October.
Well, yeah.
Am I-
I think it's good. I think it's good to go now because as currently written, it would prohibit the operation of food trucks on town streets. If that's the only edit the council's asking for, that's already there.
Except by permit is the way it's written, yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, so then we're covered. Okay, I was misunderstanding some of the discussion. Thank you. And then, but we still want to have a larger discussion about parking for Metro. I think there are also issues with building construction that just completely ignore parking plans. I routinely see more than 3 vehicles parked and nothing ever seems to happen. So that there's a lot of stuff for us to work on.
A quick clarification, Steve and Ron and Jeffrey, this proposed code amendment will help us regulate the food trucks we've been seeing in town over the last few months, right? So public spaces includes these parking lots and so on. Okay. And then is there a validity period for the permit that needs to be, does it matter, or is that the way it's written, it's up to the discretion, or do we want to kind of set a time limit for how long the permit is valid once it's been granted?
Yeah, I think that all needs to be there. And also if there's going to be a fee.
I noticed that, yeah, I understood Debbie and Shannon had proposed no fee. And I noticed that in the language, that's fine for my end, but I'm wondering about that too.
The ordinance allows for a fee should we change our minds. We don't have to change the ordinance, which is fine.
Fine.
Right, that's one of the things the committee, the Ways and Means Committee could look at.
Yep.
I also think it's a 1 year
For that
permit.
committee to do.
You know, it's just for that night or that afternoon or that morning, whatever.
Exactly, because then, one can show up again with the same permit, arguably, so.
Or we could have a fee for an extended permit and no fee for a day permit. I mean, we could be creative here.
Now you're thinking like me, Robin.
We could also ask for a percentage of like they do with retail.
Yeah, we could do that too.
Percentage of the profits.
That's right. We charge them for the parking too. Yeah, that would be the way I would think.
We could have meals. We could be first online for the meals. How about that?
Speaking of finances and season extension, that's the next topic on our agenda. Kabir?
I can say a few words, and Matt, would be great if you can add to that. So if you remember, at the last meeting, I offered to, try and put down some numbers in terms of what it would mean if we were to try and recover our costs for an extended pool season. And in your packet. It came a bit late in the day today, but we have provided a one-pager that lays that out. I've shared it separately with the pool committee liaisons, council members on the pool committee, so they can eyeball it as well earlier. And basically, I can do a quick run through it, Matt, if that's useful, and then would love for you to add to it. These are, rough estimates. So this is not, precise numbers. These are quick, rough estimates, but I think they are directionally head in the right direction. I think we've captured most of the costs. I think we've captured most of the revenue parameters. I started with for Matt Trollinger, I got the invoices we have received over the last 2 fiscal years from American Pool. I got all the utility costs, as well as security, cleaning, insurance costs associated with the pool. And the sort of cost figures that you see at the top of that one pager are based on all of those estimates. I separately asked Phil Young to informally kind of look at the top line number there, the 285K, to see whether that's what he has seen in the budget. And he said, yes, sort of top down, that's consistent with what he has seen. In fact, oddly enough, it's very close to the number he has in the budget, which was interesting since I did a bottom up estimate. And then I assumed an extended pool season to be from start of April to the end of October, because we understood from American Pool that for those months, you don't need to then make the additional investments to winterize our pool. And what that means is if past October month, like November starting, you would need to add another heater. You would, to follow county code, convert the pool house to function in winter months, right? Because as you know, the pool house has open ceilings and so on. So you would need to make all of those investments to significantly winterize. So to operate in these months, you don't need to winterize. You can operate with the 2 heaters we have now and with all the operational functionality that already exists in the pool. So I assumed an extended pool season that is April to October. As you know, this year, we will be operating from April to October. And so that this is a good sort of anchor year for us to think through that. And then on the revenue side, I'll run through this and then you can ask me questions.
You said something. You just said that this year we are going to do April. We are?
We didn't, what I mean by this calendar year, this calendar year, we are April to October, as you know. So we'll just keep that in mind, that it's it'll be the first time this calendar year we are operating with that April to October period. That's what my understanding is. I don't know if that's
I don't
happened in
understand
previous
that.
years.
I don't know that that's the case.
This calendar year we opened in April, right?
No, nothing like this.
We didn't open until May.
Oh, okay. So we have a slightly extended period than in the past.
Yeah,
You mean your
Some
numbers,
anchor numbers.
your numbers was extended, okay.
Yeah.
beginning of May as opposed to
End
Memorial.
of May, and exactly. And then on the revenue side, I took, Matt Zaft had done sort of preliminary but meaningful conversations with 3 clubs. These are clubs that are well regarded in the area. They are multiple town residents are members of these clubs. And the discussions he had about what it would mean to rent lanes to those clubs. And I built these sort of revenue estimates based on that. So, and I standardized the rates because we would not be offering lane rates to one club that would be different to the other club. Some clubs wanted more hours, some clubs wanted less hours. And I built the revenue based on those estimates that they were provided. I added another revenue line because I believe, Debbie, you can correct me, or Shannon, that the pool survey asked residents if they would be willing to pay a fee for an extended season. I understand of the pool survey respondents, 80 said that they would be willing to pay a fee. So I took that 80 number, assumed a $200 reasonable fee. We can debate. I don't have a strong view either way. I just assumed that and then created that revenue figure. So based on that, again, these are rough estimates. This is just to ground our conversation, just to give us a directional sense. So we're not talking in the abstract. We have a fuller sense of the picture, a more informed sense of the picture. it looks like we could potentially recover our costs for an extended pool season. And depending on the level at which we rent out, or whether we charge an extended pool season fees or not, we could even potentially make a profit. And I like Shannon's pushback on that. We are not in the business to make a profit. So I think if to the extent that we can recover our costs, I think this gives me a bit more confidence than where we were on this conversation previously. Matt, do you want to add to that?
Sure, not a whole lot. I think you covered it pretty well. As Councilmember Kumar said, the numbers we're looking at they're not exact numbers, but I think the idea was the first criteria. What would this proposal from the pool committee cost us roughly? And then the next question would be, well, since we haven't budgeted for it, what would be some ways that we might look to make that happen and work within the budget framework that we have for this fiscal year? Because obviously an early opening next year was not included in the budget and would still fall under this fiscal year. And so I think what he's done here is to basically say, this is the cost roughly. Now the next step could be, let's do a deeper dive into these numbers and look not just at these regular costs of running the pool, but we might also then start to look at things like other administrative costs that might come out of it, or get a better sense of what our heating bills would be. And then the conversation can move to, okay, where do we
go from there? I agree.
Where do we go from there? And is it a question of how do we pay for that? Is it that we find a way within our budget to pay for it? And I think this is also probably going to be brought up when we get to the Ways and Means or Revenue Committee as well, as what are some potential creative ways that we can look to make this happen.
Yeah, I also think when Matt Saft or the pool committee made their proposal, and I think Steve, you and I exchanged emails on this, it didn't look attractive. It was like one club. It felt like the numbers were not, sensible. So our first question as a group should be, is it directionally, can we get to a point where we are cost recoverable? And the analysis we have here directionally suggests we could. I don't think this is how we move forward. These are not the numbers we move forward on. I think now that we might have this directional sense, at least I have, on Jeffrey's recommendation, I think it would be good for Matt to then drive sort of a more systematic analysis with Debbie and Shannon's and the pool committee's involvement to kind of take the next step.
I have a couple of things here. Shannon, you want to first? Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. So, but just so I understand this, because I've been going over the numbers. So basically, in order for us to recoup the money that it would take us to open the pool, a month earlier in April or April, May, and then a month later in October, we would then have to rent out to these 3 groups for the entire season, right? That's what your numbers are based on.
That's right. So I made the assumption all 28 weeks, those hours as proposed by the clubs.
So in order to keep it open on the back and the front end for just a little bit, we'd have to give up, basically a lot of that club then for the whole summer. I mean, people will be using our pool and all sorts of things just for those 2 shoulders.
If we want to recover those costs, this is what it would mean.
Okay.
And we could, as it looks favorable, so we could kind of toggle these down, right? We could say we will not rent out in May, or we will not rent out in June.
But
We
the
could
numbers
also-
where you recoup the costs are based on all of those weeks.
All of those weeks, exactly. And also, we could arrive as a group at a view that says it would be nice to recover some of our costs and not all of our costs, right? And then this gives us a baseline understanding of what that would take. So like, a renting at that rate per month will give us 18 grand in revenue. So that gives us a baseline understanding of what it would mean if we wanted to recover some of our costs. So if those clubs are amenable to us renting to them for April, May only, or April, May, and October only, and so on.
But so if renting gives us 18 grand a month, but it really costs us like an estimate of 57 grand a month to run the pool.
Yeah, because these are recovering the added month costs. They're not recovering.
Right. So it takes them all summer and all year to recoup just the added cost of each end.
Exactly. So if you want to recover those costs and we don't want to incur that on our budget, then that is the implication of these estimates. And so these estimates don't drive policy, they just anchor our thinking.
Yeah.
So we have to decide, right, the direction we want to take as a group.
Yeah. Do I say an opinion or?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't think we should do that. So.
Yeah, you would say, if you want the extended pool season, let's pay for it. And let's not relinquish access to the pool for the whole season.
Yeah, I would not want to rent out the pool in the summer months and all of the traffic and things that come along with it, just to get, a couple extra weeks of swimming, in a cold month.
Got it.
Is my opinion.
I have a couple of just thoughts. We don't have to debate these now. I think we're going to be talking about this for a while. 28 weeks. What's the likelihood we get 28 weeks? What's the deal when it snows, when it rains, when it's Christmas, when there's school breaks and they don't do it. So we might lose revenue there because I'm sure they are not going to pay us for time not used. Okay.
Yeah.
Number one. Number two, what's the legality of renting out the pool? That's for Ron. Number three, if I lived behind the pool, I'd be apoplectic. I think we have to think about our neighbors. These are not quiet sports. It might be when you're swimming, but when you have a gang, it's not quiet. We're talking what, 6 a.m, 5:30? Okay. What I really feel strongly about as we talk about this pool extending the season is, what are our numbers? I would love to know, and we can't do it till the end of this season. What has our use been in September? And now that we're going to be open in October, we can do these numbers next year because hopefully it seems like you have to check in these days. It's, what Member Splash seems to be working. And I would love to see the use. I know this weekend, and this is only anecdotal, but Saturday, there weren't that many people at the pool. Sunday night, there were people at a food truck, so what are we being fiscally responsible keeping this pool open for this extended time? Are we more servicing these pool clubs, which I have no interest in doing? I feel like we're like the Airbnb of pool rentals, So anyway, those are my 2 cents, and I don't want to carry on. Anybody else?
I'm not here to defend the pool rental, just to be 100% clear. I'm here for us to make informed decisions based on numbers. You, Debbie, you, Shannon, as the pool committee liaisons, would have to take this on and investigate that systematically. And all the things you listed, finding and talking to those potentially apoplectic neighbors, as you described them. I bless you to follow up on that front.
I'm going to send you to do that.
Yeah.
I'm not doing it.
Hey, you don't want me to go do that.
I do.
I think what was your first statement? I had a quick reaction to that.
It was the 28 weeks. Yeah.
Why I picked the 28 weeks, or you said, hey, if we have some sudden disruptions, we won't get. So Phil Young had a great, this is just to kind of put it on the record for you to consider. He had a great suggestion, which is that we probably, if again in the scenario we move forward, you probably want guarantees, you want a deposit, you want some line of sight to the income so that you can mitigate against this potential risk. So just to keep
Right.
that in your thought process as you move forward. So the question was, we had an email exchange and we had a discussion, and it seemed like we didn't know directionally what this would mean financially. Now we have some sense. So then the question is, should we investigate this more systematically? Should we answer these questions that Debbie has laid out? My recommendation would be we should. And it's possible, as you both are intimating, Debbie and Shannon, that we may come away with the view that even if we want to have an extended pool season, financing it this way may not prove attractive for our town to pursue.
I think that's a good way to put it. I really would love to have this discussion next year after we have solid numbers. For years, we've been talking about numbers and we haven't had a chance to get them honestly. And I think we might have a chance to get that this year. And I'd rather have this discussion.
Yeah, I think starting in November, early, we can collect this data and start looking at it and, sort of building on this case. I think that would be smart for us to do as a group.
Okay, thank you. Good discussion. We'll plan to put this on the work session agenda for November, and we'll work with Matt or both Matts to get some of the data that we'll need to understand what the use actually is.
Does Ron want to say anything about legality of renting? Because we had that discussion earlier where there was this 1974 decision by a judge at that time. So is there any update on that?
Well, I think it's not legal right now, but there might be some way we can get charter changed or something else done. Ron, can you address?
Sure. Well, so the issue wasn't decided in 1974 with respect to leasing. The issue in 1974 was whether the town could operate a pool and restrict membership to town residents. There was a town resident and the Dorset House, I believe it was, that challenged the town's ability to restrict membership to town residents. And the court concluded that the restriction was lawful based on Park and Planning's approval of the pool and the town's charter. The town's charter provides that the town has the general power to take actions for the health, safety, comfort, convenience, welfare, and happiness of the residents of the town and visitors thereto and sojourners therein. And the court declared that charter provision would generally restrict the town from operating a pool for others. And so the question is, does that language in that decision restrict leasing? The court wasn't asked to resolve that specific question. So I can't give you a definitive answer. It's difficult to predict the outcome of litigation, but it is a different issue that was decided in 1974. I wouldn't want to say more on the public record, but if we wanted to have a closed session, I could give you more legal advice on my thoughts.
Maybe we make this, Steve, part of the November work session discussion against the added new data and so on.
Good idea. Thank you, Kabir. Okay, with that, I'd like to move on to draft charter, Ways and Means Committee. Kabir again.
Okay. So, I think actually this came out of conversations with both Steve and Robin bilaterally, Jeffrey, so not in violation of the OMA. And it was to investigate really what I would call non-tax revenue. So, as you know, on the tax side, our income is, we have income tax plus property tax, but it's really property tax. It's income tax as a large share of our revenue, but it's really property tax that we can control. So that path is somewhat known and understood. But what is unclear is what are possibilities on the non-tax side, where I think we need creativity. Robin had put an op-ed, I think, in the town journal about some ideas. we just now discussed, on the pool side, it's not straightforward, to kind of take these steps. So I felt like we could leverage the expertise of some really capable people in our town to try and help us and help sort of surface the full range of possibilities, and maybe with our engagement and blessing, investigate a few of them more systematically. So that's my proposal. I know that Jeffrey and I had a conversation yesterday, and Jeffrey's added proposal to that is that this group could arguably also propose a tax plan. So also look at the tax side of the equation. And my sense is that we really need the non-tax side. That's a gap. So I would definitely prioritize that. But I'm open to what the group thinks and what is sensible. And then secondly, one last thing is that I think that I really like the Stormwater Committee as a model. Time-bound, technical, defined objective, and so I feel those are the best, most effective committees, if I may put it that way. And not to disparage any of the other committees, but I feel that if we can make it time-bound, I think if we can kind of put a real strict timeline on this, I think we will probably come away with, a stronger outcome here for all of us than if it goes on for a couple of years or 3 years and so on. So that's my proposal to all of you to consider.
Okay, so let me just say that, I do greatly appreciate Councilmember Kumar's thinking about this. And when he first brought it up, I was hesitant because, I was thinking that this would be, what he was talking about was something that the Budget Committee would be undertaking. But then having a lot of discussions about this with our Masters of Public Administration, and thinking about the way, for example, the Congress operates, where they have a Budget Committee which makes suggestions on how to spend money, and you have a Ways and Means Committee which gives advice on how to raise money, whether it's from taxes or fees. Then at the next meeting that we had, I said, oh, I thought about this and now I really like the idea. So then when we put when Matt did the draft, he really included all discussion of recommendations at all forms of revenue. And so, remember, it's the mayor's, this is the one area where the mayor actually sort of initiates policy, because the mayor, suggests the mission of the committee and the committee members, and the council approves. So I'm open to discussion, whatever you all want. Now, if you decide that the mission should be limited to just fees and non-tax revenue, I'm fine with that. I think it's a good idea to have a way to create a structure for citizen input into our tax rates, because we don't really have that right now. And years ago, when tax rates were reduced artificially, it was done without, this is many, before any of you were around, it was done without any citizen input, and it really turned out to be a mistake. And then we had to raise it a little bit a few years ago, I think. Councilmember President Circa might remember that. But in any case, I do feel that if you decide to limit the mission to non-tax revenue, I don't think it should be a committee that sunsets, because I think this is a good committee to put in place ongoing, so that from now till the end of, until someone has a better idea, that each year this committee provides input into what the fees will be, because the real benefit of this committee system is to have citizen input and an extra layer of research. So For example, this committee could look at the fees that are charged for building applications. And this committee can do the research to see what other similar municipalities are charging. This committee could look at what other municipalities in the area are doing in terms of these food trucks and what fees charge. How much is charged when someone wants a dumpster, and on and on. So anyway, that's all I have to say, but I applaud Council Member Kumar for his initiation of this idea, because it does create more resident and citizen involvement in policy.
And I would add to that very quickly, Robin, that I think on the non-tax side, we could look at all of the above, right? We could look at these creative ideas. We could look at just like existing fee structures, creative ideas inclusive of what Ron put out, and Steve's idea, if you remember, like, hey, we're chopping these trees, could we do something with the wood? Things like that. Plus our existing fee structure. But I was talking to Barbara Condos. I see she's dialed on you, and I know she can't participate, but she also talked about government grants. And you heard how ARPA is influencing that downstream earlier today. So that there's all this community financing that we could also potentially tap into that we might not have looked at. So on the non-tax side, I feel like it's a rich agenda. If we can focus the group on that, get them to give us those ideas, really investigate those, I think it will, I feel instinctively like we would propel significantly forward.
All right. First of all, on the highly vital and critical piece of it, it's called the History and Archives Committee Charter. On the version we have, do need to change that to the appropriate name. But on the more serious side,
Robin is referring to the charter draft that Matt gave. He probably used another committee charter. By the way, there are two charter drafts. There's the one that I had originally drafted when I shared with Steve, introduced the idea to Steve, that we also, Matt, I think also included that in the packet. So you can look at the language if it's useful.
Yes, and mea culpa on the.
Okay, all right. Well, the point is more substantive under the duties. I think it should have a duty about looking at existing fees and recommending whether we need to change them for the kinds of things that Jeffrey was saying, looking what other municipalities are charging. Are we in line with the other municipalities? That kind of thing is an ongoing process that would be, a committee that therefore lasts. But I think it should be a part of the committee's business.
Agreed. So I think the real question is, we all won the committee. We see the benefits on the non-tax side. And then the question really is, should the committee also look at the tax side? And should it go beyond a time period?
I agree with Jeffrey that it is important to get citizen input into the tax side. One of the things the budget committee gets is a statement from, I don't know who it is, it's not the controller's office, it's somebody in the county, that says, it basically allows us to say whether we should increase or decrease our property tax next year. And in fact, the last year or two, we should have been increasing our property tax according to that, and we haven't. So that's because our income taxes were going down, our property taxes fell. Our assessed value fell.
Yes.
And
it might go up, by the way, in Jan.
Right, and so to maintain a constant rate, we should have had a higher property tax.
Yes.
But that's something that can go into the Ways and Means Committee is what I'm trying to say, and give us an estimate yourselves whether we should raise our property tax every year or decrease it.
Robin, I felt, both you, Jeffrey, Ron, others are more experienced on this, that is a kind of qualitatively different exercise on the tax side. And it sort of feels like a different endeavor, because we know it's property taxes, and what we're really looking for is how much and when. And so it just feels, and what I'm on the non-tax side, I feel like we just don't have a picture. We don't have a handle on it. It requires a lot more work and a lot more investigation. It feels like qualitatively a different exercise. And that was my concern. I'm also I agree with Jeffrey vehemently agree, in fact, that we need citizen involvement in setting our tax rate. I wonder if the committee structure is the best way to do that, given that it's sort of boxed in, right? We know it's property, we know it's, in a certain direction. I just don't know if the committee structure is the best. I'm not trying to problematize this. I just don't know if that's the best way to do that. But I agree vehemently that we need citizen engagement on that front. Love to hear from others. Shannon, Debbie, Steve.
I'm a little confused. Okay, sorry. I don't get what's different about the Ways and Means Committee and the Revenue Committee. Aren't they a little similar?
The budget committee, I think you mean.
No,
Yeah, I'm sorry if I think probably the way I presented it was unclear. Essentially, I had Kabir, as Kabir had said, he had a draft charter, and when he had originally conceived of it, he had the idea
Going back in June. So
revenue.
Oh, okay,
So that was the vernacular was Revenue Committee at that time.
but
And
it's the
so
Ways
that-
and Means Committee.
That's the updated language. That's what Jeffrey is proposing. And
Okay.
the real difference if you wanted to use those two as sort of to draw a distinction is it exclusively non-tax time bound versus both tax and non-tax and for multiple years. And that's really the distinction. And as I've been explaining, I'm of the former view because I feel it's a gap for us. We don't understand that well. It requires creativity. Look how our conversation on the pool went. It's just not straightforward. And we need to leverage the smarts like this on the stormwater side. And then I think that I feel time-bound committees are likely to be more effective, is my view. But as Jeffrey will remind us, this is his call at the end of the day. So
Well, no, it's
really
my proposal, but it's whatever, the thing is, you could always start out a certain way. I mean, the committee, just because the committee, there's something in the mission doesn't mean the committee is going to follow it anyway.
You're on record on that.
So, the Ways and Means Committee is looking at ways to raise revenue. So all of our committees don't necessarily follow a strict mission, and we don't want them to. We want everybody to think outside the box.
Well, maybe Jeffrey, for the sake of our fellow legislators here, maybe you and I can re-huddle on this and if you'd like to.
I don't need to re-huddle on it. It's what you all think. It's gonna whatever you approve, we will make sure it works, and it can always be amended. So it's not. I think it's a great idea, and I think we need to get it going. And then it's the same thing with when the Equity Inclusion Committee was given their mission. There was part of it that they felt belonged to another committee, which I guess eventually we need to change that. But it's not as if we're very collegial and we all work together. And so I think we're getting too much into the nitty-gritty to worry about the language. But I mean, I don't think we should restrict the Ways and Means Committee just on fees. And they're only making recommendations. You all have the final say on everything. So.
I'd like to wrap up this discussion and sort of come to some agreement or consensus on the next steps. And I guess I'd like to, I personally agree with the mayor that it's appropriate for the town to have a standing Ways Means Committee. But I'd like to respect the impetus for this whole idea, which from Kabir, to have a focused, time-limited group to explore revenue opportunities for the town. And so I think personally, I'd be happy to have this start as a time-limited group. And perhaps one of the recommendations of this time-limited group would be that the town should have a standing Ways and Means Committee. And we might attract different people to serve as committee members, depending on focus. I don't know if anybody had any thoughts on that before we move on.
I tend to like that idea, not because it's considered, but I like this notion that it'll attract different people. And I think there's definitely a lot of value in that. I think it will attract different people once we get it in that direction. I agree.
Okay, how about Kabir, you and I talk about this a little further and see if we can have a
I agree. We'll do that.
Proposal to bring
We'll do that.
to the council.
Let's do that. Let's do
Okay.
that. Sounds good. Thank you, guys.
Okay. We're behind schedule. This was an overly ambitious schedule, so we might have to trim some of the ending items. Procurement policy update for Matt.
Yeah, I can be brief on this one because I don't specifically have an updated proposal for your consideration, but I sort of got excited as I went back to the drawing board on the procurement policy and started to do some research into equity, diversity, inclusion types of elements of procurement policy, as well as sustainability. And so I began to do some research and have been in contact with both the Equity, Inclusion, and Environment Committee, who are going to look over some draft proposals to include in the policy to then eventually come back to you all for consideration.
That's great. Thanks for moving ahead. Glad to see the engagement with the Diversity and Equity Committee. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Okay, hearing on this, the next item is some suggestions on a non-variance building applications process. How can we perhaps expedite our building review processes? Matt, if you want to lead it, and then we'll pull Ron in as required.
Sure. So just quickly, what you all have access to is a couple of notes from Ron on ways that when we do get a variance application in front of the council, to make the process easier is not the right word, but more easily digestible, I think, for the council, to better get a handle of what is really before you. And then the second element of it that I believe Kabir had worked with Ron on briefly was if we were to streamline non-variance hearings to essentially incentivize people to follow the regulations and rules that we set, what would need to change in our code? And so the second, and it looks like maybe it was too brief in that, so Kabir can add to that.
Steve, may I just quickly, I'll be very quick.
Absolutely.
So Robin, you may also want to add to this. So this came out of, as you know, I think all of us have a shared ambition to strengthen our code, right? On multiple factors, definitely around building. Stormwater, we've just taken a first stab at that, right? As Robin explained, it's really just putting us on the map, and we still have a lot to do. So as we are thinking about how do we strengthen our code, how do we make it to work better, how do we realize our vision for where we want to take this town, what goes with that is when it comes to applications that are within code, could we create a process that is both in keeping with the experience of those applications, as you saw from our last variance hearing, the second one, That was, by the way, a building permit and variance hearing, and all of us focused on the variance because the building was in code. And the focus was on the variance because the building was in code as recommended. Correct me if I'm wrong, if I misunderstood that. And so, if it is within code, could we change the process so that it goes to the mayor's office and appeals come to the council? And we focus on strengthening the code and strengthening the variance process and focus our energies on that front. I think that how it came out in our discussions. Robin, you can correct me if I'm mischaracterizing that. And so as we were looking through that, we asked Ron, it's like, okay, if you want to do that, what would it mean? And what you see, what Matt has included is Ron's very sort of clear, practical, like how would the code change for us to be able to pursue that process? So all those things that he strikes out is the language in the code that would need to be changed for us to move in that direction. If I'm not mistaken, Ron, I think that's what he did. So like, let me show you the level of changes we would need to make to move in that direction. So I think the conversation is on two levels. One, what do you think about that line of direction? And we may not all agree on that. And two, if we are to go down that line of direction, what of Ron's suggestions to appeal to you? Are there questions around that? And how do we act on it? Robin, you want to add more to that?
After the meeting, I decided that we should have no variances. That was the easiest way to handle it.
That's the extreme version of what I just described.
I don't think that's practical. We've got to see our code as something that is changing rather than a Bible that's set, and so modifying it along the lines you're saying is a good thing. But I'm not really yet at a point where I can. I have a plan. If that yet is final, or I see that as a good thing, I'm not there yet. Other things brewing in my head at the moment are, how do we build climate action into our building code, energy efficiency into our building code. These are things down the line that we're going to have to deal with.
On HVACs, for instance, that could be the next.
Yeah, well, right. Yeah. I mean, it's more than that, but so we've just got to see it as something that is evolving, and variance is certainly as part of that. That's all we're going to say. Really.
I totally share that view for what it's worth. I think I know in the orientation, I was of the mind that we should be really, really careful what we do with the code. We should be, really circumspect in terms of how we move forward. But I think that we do need to strengthen it when it comes to building permits. I do, like we are doing with stormwater, I think it needs to come to assist us to be able to implement in that direction. And my experience is that when an application is within code, we listen to the technical experts that are around us. And so, if it's within code, we need to change the code. Shannon is looking skeptical. The code is not strong enough.
I don't really understand. I guess I just don't understand what is it about the building code that you want to change? I mean,
I would love to talk about that. I feel that, we know there are homes that are significantly big for their lots. We know that. We see them. You live next to one of them, and so the code, it facilitates the construction of those homes today, and that needs to change.
But I mean, you're talking about you're saying that, that we need to establish the variances. The variances are not falling under the code, but we need to make the code stronger, you're saying, but then you want to entertain variance discussions where the variances are taking these closer to the street than the code allows. So I guess I'm just confused.
I'm not sure I said that around variances. I'm saying on the code, it can get stronger. And so the variances are less likely. And on variances,
the variances are not following the code. And so we had the situations where there were 4 different places, but so they didn't follow the code. So you're saying that you want to make the code stronger but then you're still going to have then more variances because
No,
because
on
we're
the
not,
variance-
the variances aren't following the code that we have set up. I mean, those are in addition to.
Yeah, on variance, my current thinking is, and I sent an email to all of you earlier today, is that the process, makes it hard for us to be an informed sort of adjudicator of the variance. And if we can make that work better, we have clear data, we are referencing.
But it doesn't follow the code. And so, I mean, it's pretty simple. Like a variance doesn't follow what's in the code. And
I'm not sure
then,
what you are asking me. Are you asking me whether I believe there should be variances or not? Is that your question?
I guess I'm just confused. I guess I'm just confused as to.
Because we can talk about that. I believe we permit variances. I think if we feel that that's not the direction we should take, I'm happy to talk about it as a group. That's not my opinion. That's the pre-existing way in how we've been functioning as a town. I believe that, like we are doing with stormwater, there are gaps in our code on permits, and we need to get that on the building side, and we can get that stronger.
I guess the question is, so do you think that the variances that we discussed in the last meeting with the 4 different things, like are you suggesting that we change the code, the code would have then encompassed those variances so that there wouldn't have been variances?
No, I'm not saying that. The last hearing is not on my mind at all for this. This really came out of the stormwater discussions. And what we are proposing is, when something is within code, can it go through a different process? And we are basing that on a couple of things. We are basing it on, we strengthen the code, so we create a different process to incentivize compliance with the code. 2, when we look at our own experience with enforcing the code, when it comes to within code permits, we tend to follow the recommendation of the engineer and the lawyer because it's within code. We don't have, as a council, the ability to do much with that. And so we are basing it on that, and it came out of the stormwater. It had nothing, in my mind, that has got nothing to do with the variance.
I'm all for strengthening our code, and certainly around stormwater, we're already doing that, and that's important. And Shannon, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to get more variances. It depends how you strengthen the code. I mean, an example that I'm not necessarily thinking of is, say our code says that you should put solar panels on your roof, all right, with a new building. But we would say at the same time, unless there's a reason not to. So, so that explain to us why you're not doing it is what we're asking for if you're not going to do it, which doesn't require a variance, as long as we've got that built into the code.
Exactly, that's a great example. Exactly.
But the thing also, Kabir, is even when it's in code, we've still got upset neighbors, and we've got to allow them to have a voice. That's because that
exactly. And so, and in what Ron shared with us, there's an appeal process. There is his recommendation as it stands now. That's, by the way, Robin, that is the level of questioning and discussion I would love to do. Like, how do we take that step forward and make sure that we are in keeping with the culture and historical practices and giving voice to neighbors? I think Ron's suggestion was an appeal process, for example. I don't know if that's the final word on that. Obviously it's not, but that's an idea that he tabled in the document he shared. I don't know if Ron wants to say anything on that front.
Yeah,
in terms
sorry,
of what
I just
he,
had to turn the
no
light
worries,
on.
no worries.
I'm switching devices. The other one was running out of battery. So, yeah, there's 2 issues. One, how can we strengthen the variance hearing to, well, maybe not strengthen, but make it a bit more efficient so all the council members have all the same information and can pinpoint the issues that need to be addressed at the hearing. And so Kabir and I talked about some ideas that I've seen work well in other jurisdictions, and ideas that Kabir had that I thought were great ones. So those are detailed in his email.
Just to quickly comment on that, Shannon, it's not so that we can somehow approve those kinds of variances. It's so that we can all collectively look at the same data. We can reference the same kind of language. We come into the process with benefit of Ron's expertise. I just want to, editorialize that just to be clear.
Right.
It's
So,
really to improve the process, not the outcome as such. It's really how do we function better, and so that we are really more technical in our discussions and conversations. That was the thinking that I had.
yeah. So for example, I provided a site plan and highlighted in different colors the actual area of the construction that was in variance from the code requirements. So the council members could look and see, okay, this area shaded in yellow, that's variance A. That's what we're talking about. Another idea is, if an applicant comes in and says, my lot is shallow, well, we could have a table of the other lots in town with substantive dimensions in the table so that the council can look at it and see, well, is this lot actually shallow compared to others in the town? The average depth of lots in the town is Y. And then, finally, I explained, before I go into a variance hearing, I'm looking at the application and assessing the pros and cons. I don't know how the council is going to rule, but I start developing the arguments on both sides to help me write the decision. And so, I could share that information with you in advance. I don't want to sway your opinion, but, it might give you assistance in thinking what are the legal arguments that one could make that you could rely on to approve or disapprove a request.
Now, to clarify, that's one topic.
Yes.
And I sent that email before this meeting, but it was not, this topic is not on the agenda today. That's a separate topic on how we can make variance process work better, as Ron just described. And we should pick that up. Maybe that's in the next working session to talk through. We can talk about it today, but maybe we can give it more justice next time. But the topic that's on the agenda is the one, Ron, you're going to say more about next.
Sure. Yeah. And then the second issue is, should there be hearings for permit applications when no variance is required? When the question is, does the application comply with the code, yes or no? Should that be administrative, or should the council hear that? I don't have an opinion on that. That's a policy issue for you to discuss. I'll say that the town has a long and treasured history with respect to having these hearings, because they provide a venue for neighbors to address concerns. It provides multiple eyes to review an application. It allows the council to review tree removal permits at the same time as building permits, and to impose requirements like parking plans, equipment stages, and the like. On the other hand, you may feel that it's taken up a lot of time at meetings. Matt's come up with a good compromise that you could also consider. I think it's done in Martin's Additions, for example, where neighbors are notified of an application. If a neighbor wants a hearing, the neighbor can request a hearing. But if no neighbor requests a hearing and no council member requests a hearing, then the application can be reviewed administratively. But again, all this is for your policy decision making.
And Ron, you also have some experience from other towns on this front that you mentioned to me.
Yes.
Did you say sorry?
Sure, yeah.
Did you say something?
That was an easy question. Yes.
He just said it though, didn't he?
Yes.
Yeah. So most of my other clients do allow permits to be approved administratively. But some Chevy Chase View have hearings on all of them. Town of Somerset and Glen Echo as well, I think. And then Martin's Additions only if a neighbor requests.
So that's the issue. Thanks, Ron. On the table to discuss. Steve.
So I think this has been a good laying out of the situation, discussion of some of the options. Are we looking to try to come to resolution tonight? I was thinking we just sort of think on it and then pick this up again.
I agree.
Okay. In part because I'm getting tired. I kind of like the Martin's Addition approach. But even then, I'm concerned that could inhibit resident participation, and Summer does have quite a history of engagement on building permit applications.
If it helps the group, maybe, taking this sort of discussion, we haven't heard from everyone, but
Right.
picking up from what people are saying, Ron's description, Matt's experience, maybe we do another stab at a proposal on how we could take it forward, and we can bring it into a conversation at another working session. So we could do that. And admittedly, I think this was more sort of an outgrowth of the stormwater process, and so we can now look at this a little bit more clear-headedly. And I don't know, Ron, what you think?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I think this is going to involve a lot of council discussion. And I forgot to tie up one little piece.
Yeah.
So when Kabir's mentioning strengthening the code, I think the thought there was, if we're taking away the hearing, but strengthening the code at the same time to address the types of things that residents come to the hearing to talk about, like tree removals, stormwater, etc., then the residents' concerns are addressed without the need to have a hearing.
Great point. And Steve, if you remember, by the way, we have revitalized PNRC, and they are going to be coming to the council and to the town with a proposal on strengthening the code on tree removals along these lines. We may not approve it, we may not take it up, but along these lines of how do we bake into the code the things that are, being addressed now through the hearing process.
Right. And that's well said. We want this to be as objective as possible, so there's no confusion, uncertainty, anxiety, or whatever.
Exactly. So, okay, if we will circle back to the group with an updated proposal.
Okay, great topic. I'm going to try and speed up for the last few items. Gas-powered leaf blower ban. The Environment Committee is recommending that the effective date for that ban be moved up of, I think, 3 months, from January 1st of 2023 to September 1st of 2022. Basically the start of next September, so that during the heavy part of leaf blowing season next fall, we would have electric leaf blowers, and we would have a quieter town, and a town and workers would be more protected. So just to move it up 4 months, and that would be introduced at the next council meeting in October, and then voted on at some point after that. Does anybody have any questions or comments on that?
I think this is unfair to the small guy. I think they have to save up a lot to buy new equipment, and we're hurting the little guy. Maybe not the big guys, because they're big companies and they can probably weather this storm. But we've said it's going to be 2023, and maybe that's what they're counting on. And I think we're hurting the little guy. That's all.
Yeah, I think that, we already made that decision that it was going to be at that time. So to change it now seems,
It is still a year away from when it's going into effect. And if we have it as September 22, both Chevy Chase Village and DC will already have those bans in place, and companies will have adjusted. Most of the companies who serve Chevy Chase Village and DC also serve us. So are we going to be unfair to our residents who have to suffer this awful noise, or protect questionable small businesses who may already have converted because Chevy Chase Village and DC already?
I think we should move it up. I think that the large companies have already made the transition. I think noise is, it's a nice thing to talk about noise, but these are high pollutants. I think it's very clear that making that shift makes sense. I think the little guys, if they haven't done it by now, and if they're not in a position to do it by next September, they're not going to do it.
It's just that
And so,
we've given them a date and now we're going back on it.
yeah, but it's still ways out. And most of the people who service our town are not these quote unquote little guys.
That's not true. That's anecdotal evidence. Give me the numbers. You
If
can't-
I can cut in,
Yeah, go ahead.
just, this is a good discussion. A heated discussion is fine. I'd like to postpone the discussion. I just wanted to introduce as a topic. I believe there's sufficient interest to propose it or introduce it on the council agenda, and then we'll talk about it in an open town council meeting and get more participation too.
Debbie's question is a fair one. I think Robin and I, if I'm not mistaken, are liaisons to environmental. We'll try and come up with a sort of a clear rationale for why this makes sense. I do have an anecdotal sense of it and
Okay,
feel it makes sense.
Let me remind everyone of the beautiful process we have. So the idea would be that if three of you are prepared to ask our town attorney to draft an amendment to the code to change the date of the impact, then we move forward. Otherwise, it's whatever the council president schedules in the future.
I'm prepared to support
That's the
Steve
way
and
to handle
Robin.
the
Yeah,
discussion, Councilor.
I know, but I do feel that Debbie and Shannon have raised important questions and it would be ideal.
Well, so the
Bring them
thing is,
along.
if three
Right,
of you,
Steve?
if three of you, you can't have these open-ended discussions on everything. So the idea is if three of you want to move that forward, you decide that. Otherwise,
Jeffrey, that's not lost on us, but I think we do want to have, a sufficient level of discussion. I think, Steve, that's your intent. If I'm not,
but you had
Exactly.
enough on it.
go ahead, Steve.
But we haven't had this discussion with this council. And all I was trying to suggest was, this is a great discussion, but tonight at the end of our work session is not the time for that discussion. We can actually have it during a regular council meeting, and we can have some engaged resident
No,
participation.
it's not, it wouldn't, we'll talk about it at our next leadership.
Okay.
It's not for a council meeting.
Well, anytime we have proposed legislation, it gets discussed at the council meeting, right?
No,
We'll
that's
talk-
the
no.
point Jeffrey's making, to
No.
have it discussed at the council
No,
meeting.
it's
You have to
discussed at the
introduce-
work session, decide whether you want to put, anyway, we'll talk about it. But anyway,
I got myself.
it's getting late,
It's
so
just too
let's move on.
So the ARPA discussion, I propose we have in the town council meeting, and the beekeeping update be part of the manager's report at the council meeting. Unless anybody objects and wants to talk about either of those.
Well, I mean, I'm
right
only
now.
going to say on our ARPA that the funds have already arrived, and so we better start thinking about spending it because there's a time limit on spending them.
What is the time limit?
Everything has to be committed by December 24th.
Okay, all right. It's not next month, so we're
No.
cool. We're cool for a month.
But
All
I
right.
mean, you've got to sign contracts and stuff like that.
No, fair enough. Fair enough.
Right. You know what? I think we might even want to hold a special work session just on the ARPA discussion. And maybe we bring in some appropriate experts
External. Yeah,
identified by the town manager.
agreed.
I think
Agreed.
that was the purpose of this agenda item, to
Just a
confirm
step.
that the council wants to have a separate session and when.
Thank you. Perfect.
So should
Okay.
we talk about when or do that offline?
I think it would be good to talk about it now. Like, what month do you want to have it, everybody?
Robin, what's your recommendation?
Sooner rather than later
So next month?
would be good. Yep.
Yes. And how about the week after the regular council session? So the week of October 11th to 15th?
I think that's all right.
Okay, well, we'll get back to you. You know, the
That's when we're
town
going to have our
manager,
next work
the town
session.
manager will be away, but that's all right because it'll be recorded. So he can,
I'd just like to ask not to have it on a Tuesday. Tuesdays are very hard on me.
Okay,
I volunteer. on
We'll get back. Matt and I will get back to you in terms of scheduling.
Okay.
so do we want to try and schedule electronically, or we want to look at some dates right now?
No, we'll do it electronically because you have other things on your agenda.
Well,
Okay,
no, that's,
let's just do it right now.
yeah, that's it for the agenda.
Okay.
No, 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 you guys,
Ambulance.
we're supposed to talk about the ambulance staffing.
Oh, where is that? I forgot about that. Sorry, thank you. Ambulance staffing. Is that Kabir? Who's
No.
doing staffing?
That's right.
I can give sort of a quick update on that. I think that it was more that the Public Safety Committee, I think an email just went out today. So trying to schedule something with everybody's schedule has been difficult for them. So they were planning to have a substantive discussion in the committee before it went back to the council. But I think a few folks have reached out and expressed enough concern that it's worth having a town forum on this issue and to invite some representatives from Bethesda Fire Board and Chevy Chase Rescue Squad.
I think Councilmember Rovak has something in mind, but the idea was that the fire chief and this has to do only with the Bethesda Fire Department. And the suggestion, and I'll turn it over to Councilmember Rovak, know what the suggestion is.
Oh, the suggestion that I had was just to, there seems to be some question of when the ambulance that has been assigned to the Bethesda Chevy Chase Fire Department is being staffed and when it's not. So my understanding is that there was, they do these studies and they decided that our area needed to have an ambulance that is there. And so they put one into it, but there might be some question of whether or not it's fully staffed. And so it's just really kind of a fact-finding mission with the heads there to find out when is it being staffed and what those hours are currently.
It would be great to learn that, Shannon.
Yeah,
By the way, I don't know if you had a chance to talk. I see again, Barbara is on. It might be good to talk to Barbara Condos and Nat Finkelstein, and they have also a perspective on the coverage of these services.
But the Councilor Kumar, the idea was to the board members don't run the place. The question is to bring in the Montgomery County Fire Chief.
No, I think it's great.
The Bethesda Fire Department to answer questions that the council has. And this is an extension of our orientation. We had wanted to have this discussion during the orientation, but we ran out of time. So now there are a lot of questions that have been raised by residents about the ambulance service. And we want to get the answers from the people that administer the ambulance service.
Yeah.
And I know that Councilor Roback has been working very closely with the committee and with a number of residents. And remember, the idea was that the committee would make a recommendation to the council for this meeting, but they weren't able to have a meeting. So now it's become time is of the essence. So the question to the council tonight is whether you would like us to schedule a hearing with the Montgomery County Fire Chief and with the Chief of the Bethesda Fire Department.
Shannon recommends it. I think let's do it.
Yep, I agree.
Yeah, I think if Public Safety Committee has failed to meet, then I think we should go ahead and do it, yes.
Okay, so we'll schedule it and get back to you. We'll work with all your schedules.
Thank you.
Okay, and just now, as we wrap up, let's look at the schedules. So our I guess our next regular council session is Monday, October 1st. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Monday, October 4th, right?
Or 4th.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Did I say first? I meant October 4th. Right. Monday, October 4th. And then we'd like to have the work session before the middle of the month so that any comments can be added or made into the town journal. So I was thinking maybe we could have our special ARPA meeting. Maybe it'd only be like an hour long, Wednesday, October 6th,
I could do
or
that.
Thursday, October 7th.
Well, we'll get back to you about those dates, but you
Okay.
need to set the date for the next work session tonight.
Okay, next work session, I was thinking Wednesday, October 13th.
Okay, 5:15 again.
Is there any way to do it the following week?
It's too late. Well,
Too late?
too late
Okay.
for journal.
It's a high likelihood that week I will not be able to make it at all.
Oh. Well, it's probably more important to have your attendance than jive with the town journal schedule.
Well, the 20th is fine for the journal. But by the way, does that work for everybody, October 20th from 5:15 to 7:15?
Yeah.
I have a meeting at 7.
Okay. So 5 to 7.
I thought the journal submissions are the 15th of the month.
No, it's okay. It's okay. Don't worry about it. So there is a question, though, by the way, regarding the when is the vote going to take place on the stormwater ordinance?
Yeah.
That's something that needed to be decided tonight.
At the next meeting.
So Ron and I had a brief conversation with that. I think because 30 days haven't passed, it's not able to be voted for adoption at the this upcoming October meeting. So the council could reintroduce it so the clock doesn't run out in order for it to be adopted in November.
Can we do that on the consent agenda?
Yeah.
Okay, that would work.
Right. And then we would
So
vote
we
on it.
we will make sure that that's noted in the journal.
Okay.
So we're having our work session on October 20th.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to start at 5 o'clock so as to accommodate Ron. Steve, can you manage that?
I can manage that, or I could do on Monday, October 18th.
I can do that.
I can do that too.
I think I can do that.
Then make
Okay.
that 5:15 then. Ron, are you all
Yep,
right there?
That's good.
Okay, so that works for everybody, right?
Okay, we'll make it Monday, October 18th, 5 to 7.
And am I also holding October 6th and 7th for the?
We will let you know about that.
Okay. By the way, everyone, please mark your calendars for the newcomers event that Shannon and Matt are involved in for October 3rd. So hopefully COVID gods are kind to us and we can bring everyone together.
2 to 4 p.m., right?
Yes,
What's the date?
It's 3 to 5, I
3 to
think.
5, 3 to 5.
3 to 5 now? Okay.
What's the date again?
The 3rd, October 3rd.
This Sunday. No, not this Sunday. A week
Next
from
Sun-
Sunday.
And
Yeah.
remember next Monday night is the Thrive 2050 forum.
Right.
Yeah, and please advertise that again in the town because Matt's message didn't get through. Is all I can say last time.
Yeah, we need
if
a
you-
blast on that.
If we advertise again, can we include the actual panelists' names?
I actually did that in the town journal article, but I think we should do it in the blast. As most people probably won't read the town journal or my column in the town journal. Let's put it that way. So we're October 18th at 5, work session. Okay, good.
All right. Mr. President.
Move, we adjourn.
Adjourned. Good meeting. Lots of ground. More ground to cover.
All right.
Thank you all. Thanks, Ron.
Thank you. Have
Thanks,
a good evening,
Matt.
everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Night, thanks.
Bye.
Bye.